Welcome, my fellow beings, to Morbid Manor. It's so good to see you again. Tonight's story is a tale about a haunted house. But don't worry, it's nothing to lose your head over. Which happens to be the title of the story. About a house and two incidents that occurred there that made people stay away from it forever. The Mackenzie house has stood there for many, many years. Old and dilapidated. People are afraid to go to it because they say it's haunted. It was built by Raymond Charles Mackenzie sometime in the year 1911, I think. In 1911, he married Sarah Crenshaw. She was 75, he was 81. And he sold his company, thus making him the first, quite possibly, billionaire ever. He ran his company with an iron fist, a ruthless businessman who treated his employees like slaves. In 1919, Raymond had a stroke and died, leaving Sarah Mackenzie the entire estate. In 1921, 6 inmates who escaped from a local penitentiary broke into the house and murdered the servants. They knew that she never trusted banks and had a vault down in the basement. They beat her up and they tortured her badly, demanding that she tell them where her money was. Finally, battered and bloodied, she did, hoping that they'll just go away. But they didn't. They stayed in her house, eating her food, drinking her liquor, and having their way with her every night. Since they haven't seen her in years, I didn't know to go. Finally, after 10 grueling days of this, they decided to leave. They took her upstairs into the attic, tied to her rocking chair. They set her at the front window of the attic and told her to look outside at the setting sun. And when she did, one of them came up with a meat cleaver and chopped her head off completely. Then the men went into the vaults. They pushed the door inward and hooked it with a giant hook and eye type of situation to keep the door from shut. They reached into the drawers, putting money, jewels, whatever they can into their greedy little pockets. What they didn't see was that the hook and eye unlatched itself and the door shut. The men pushed on the door and pushed on it, forgetting the fact that they had to push inward in order to get in. They eventually suffocated when the police found them. They had literally clawed the skin off their own bodies in a desperate attempt to get in. Since that day, people have seen strange glowing lights. There are weird kind of noises coming from the house, like screams, wails, piano music. Some claim to have seen the headless ghost of Sarah Mackenzie wandering the hallways. But these stories are dismissed as superstitious garbage. The 2 incidents occurred that will change people's thinking. The first incident occurred in 1945, I believe, D-Day. Travis Martin, his younger brother Billy, and their 2 friends were playing baseball near the Mackenzie house. Travis had the bat. Billy threw the ball. Travis swung the bat. Ball went sailing into the air perfectly, right into the front window of the Mackenzie house. Oh, the other boys were afraid to go in, but not Travis. Oh, he heard all about these stories and he never believed any of them. Superstitious nonsense, he thought. So he went inside to go get his ball. He entered this huge room, this parlor room. The walls was 20 feet high and 25 feet across. On the mantelpiece was a huge portrait of Sarah and Raymond Mackenzie. Travis didn't like that picture. The picture scared him. The eyes seemed to follow him wherever he went. He saw these 2 French doors and he opened them up and entered a huge dining room with a huge 16-foot rectangular table set out as if for evening meal, but long since covered with layers of cobwebs. Some rats scurrying across the table. He saw these 2 steel doors with port windows, like a ship. He opened it and entered this huge kitchen. On his left, he saw a serving counter, where after the chefs prepared the meals, they would put the meals on the serving counter. The server would come out and serve it to the guests. Then he saw the basement door, where the lights were. where the convicts suffocated. He was going to go down there because it was pitch dark and it was starting to get dark outside. Going back into the living room, he went looking for his ball. And all of a sudden he heard there he saw a baseball rolling down the stairs. Finally he came to the foot of the stairs, and when Travis bent down to pick it up, he heard his voice. His name being called. Travis! It sounded far away and echoey. Again, he heard it again. Travis! Thinking it was his brother and his friends trying to play a joke on him, he went up the stairs to the second floor. There he saw the attic door open. And again he heard his name being called. Travis! He saw that the attic was a huge room. You could easily put 3, maybe 4 apartments in there. There was the white chair sitting right next to the front window. The white rocking chair made out of wicker. He saw a brown stain on the back of the chair. Probably from blood. Then he looked down on the floor and there was a circle on the floor, like a police chalk outline. Maybe this is where the head fell down, he thought to himself. All of a sudden, right before his eyes, he saw blood. Fresh blood in the circle. And then he heard a creaking noise. Again it just creaked. And he turned around, and his eyes widened in horror at what he saw. A headless corpse of an old woman rocking on the chair, rocking back and forth, pushing the chair back and forth with its feet. It had on a long white Victorian dress, long sleeve with a high collar, and a skirt all the way down to his shoes. But the corpse had no head, just a bloody severed stub where the head used to be. There in her lap in a pool of blood was the severed head of the old woman. Laying in a pool of blood with its eyes closed, and all of a sudden it opened up its eyes and looked at Travis and smiled at him. A cockroach came out of the mouth of the corpse and into its hair. And then it started to float into the air towards Travis. It was then that Travis screamed and ran down the stairs. He ran out in the hallway as fast as he could, but he could feel the head right behind him breathing onto his neck. He felt his hair standing up. As he ran down the last 3 flights of stairs, he tripped and fell on his back. He looked up at the stairwell. He couldn't see nothing, it was pitch black. And all of a sudden again he heard only this time it wasn't the baseball rolling down the stairs, it was Sarah Mackenzie's severed head. It looked at him. And then it rolled towards him on its own accord. It was right between his legs and looked up at him and said, "Dear sweet boy." Travis screamed and bolted to the windows, nearly cutting himself on the glass that came raining down. He bolted over the side of the porch, nearly knocking his brother down in the process. They found him an hour later under his bed in a fetal position, sucking his thumb like a little baby, his hair turned white. His mind had shut down completely. They placed him in a mental institution where he still remains to this day. Age 75, still in a fetal position, still recalling the horror of his son in the Mackenzie house. The second incident occurred in 1965. 2 young girls coming home from a skiing trip. Linda and Lucy Manor. They were just coming back from Canada, and all of a sudden they just got caught into a freak blizzard that came out of nowhere. Linda tried to see beyond, but it was a whiteout. You couldn't see nothing. Suddenly there was a deer right in front of them, and Linda swerved to avoid it and got the car stuck. She floored the gas, put it in reverse, tried to get it out, but the tire spun helplessly in the snow. Knowing that they would freeze to death if they stayed, they got out of the car and started to walk, see if they could find a house somewhere. They found a house. It was the Mackenzie house. They saw a fireplace through the window, and they knew that even though it was old and abandoned, at least it's someplace they could build a fire and get warm. So they went inside. They figured they needed a place to bed down for the night, and they couldn't sleep down here, there's too many rats. So they went upstairs and checked in every room, which was in various states of disrepair and rot. They went into Sarah Mackenzie's bedroom, which, strangely enough, was intact. Not a speck of dust, not a speck of rot, not a speck of mildew. The walls looked as if they'd just been built. The furniture looked as if they'd just been bought. They even found 2 nightgowns. Donning them, they sat up in the bed telling each other ghost stories, trying not to scare each other. When all of a sudden they heard what sounded like a front door opening, and somebody walking in. Thinking it might have been the owner, Lucy decides to go down and confront the person and explain why they were there. Taking the candle off her because she knew that Linda was scared, she left Linda at the kerosene lantern that was halfway turned on. Linda sat in the bed listening to the sounds. Looking around in the semi-darkened room, the fireplace had long since gone down to embers. All of a sudden she heard a scream. The most horrifying scream she ever heard. It was her sister's scream. Then she heard footsteps coming up the stairs. And then walking down the hallway. And getting closer and closer to the bedroom. Linda was scared. She put the blanket up to her face when all of a sudden she breathed a sigh of relief when she saw the familiar floral pattern of her sister's nightgown. But she couldn't see her sister's face, just the chest on down. And her sister had what looked like a ball cupped underneath her arm. She said, "Is anything wrong? What happened?" But her sister didn't answer. She stood there in the doorway. She padded over towards the bed. "What happened, Lucy?" All of a sudden, Linda felt something moist drop on her hand, and when she looked, it was a single drop of blood. "Oh my God, you are hurt!" And she turned the lantern up. She reached up to touch her sister's face, but couldn't touch anything. And when she pulled her hand back, it was covered in blood. And she screamed. And she screamed. There was her sister standing there, but she had no head. Just a bloody, severed stump where her head once was. And what Linda thought was a ball tucked under her arm was her sister's severed head with a look of absolute terror on its face. And through frozen dead lips, Linda heard her sister, "Linda! Help me! Help me, please!" Linda screamed and bolted from the bed and ran out into the hallway, down the stairs. When all of a sudden she heard piano music, and she looked, and there was Sarah Mackenzie playing the piano. The old woman looked up at her and smiled, and all of a sudden a red line crossed the old woman's neck, and the head lifted itself from the body and started floating towards Linda. Linda screamed and backed away into the loving embrace of her headless sister who grabbed her. She screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed all night long. The police found the car, and they went up to the Mackenzie house. They saw Lucy Manor's headless corpse lying at the foot of the stairs. They found Linda hiding in a closet. Her beautiful black hair had turned white, pale as a ghost. They asked her what happened, but all she could do was scream and scream and scream. She just kept screaming and screaming like Travis. She too went into a mental breakdown, and her mind shut down forever. She kept on screaming till merciful death silenced her scream in 1974. The Mackenzie house is still there on that hill. Nobody goes to it. It's all dilapidated and unsafe now because the whole second floor had long since caved in. But still people tend to see strange glowing lights. Hear noises like screams and wails and cannons. The sun proclaiming to see. Mattress goes to Lucy Manor and Sarah Mackenzie, wandering the hallways of what used to be the second floor of the Mackenzie house. Well, I hope you enjoyed this story. Join me next month when I'll come back with another tale. But until then, my fellow fiends, remember, The manor lights have now grown dim. The atmosphere here is dark and grim. So be careful, my friends, what you say or do. You never know when I'll be haunting you. Stay morbid.